Joining us now, a couple of Capitol Hill insiders, former Republican Congressman Garrett Graves from Louisiana and Michael Hardaway, former spokesperson for Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. And I know, Michael, you're trying to get that IFB in your ear so you can hear when we play those sound bites. Good to have you both as part of this conversation. Thanks so much. Here we are, day 2 of the shutdown. Congress isn't in session. We just listened to at least Speaker Johnson talk this morning about the pain that Americans are feeling. But here's what he also said about all this yesterday on a podcast.
There are some good things that could come out of a shutdown, but there's pros and cons. It does give an opportunity to the power in charge, the president in charge, to make unilateral decisions that don't need a vote of Congress about which programs in the government are essential and which are not.
Congressman, are you surprised to hear the Speaker of the House go there? I mean, isn't Congress supposed to have the power of the purse?
Yeah, but I think this shutdown is a little different than ones we've seen in the past. President Trump, to some degree, as well as the White House Office of Management Budget Director Russ Vought, I think that they're looking at this like an opportunity to demonstrate that the federal government is too big, too many people, costs too much money, too slow, too large. And they're going to prove that by having the government shut down, and I think to a large degree, calibrating where the impacts are. So I think that this is a unique shutdown, and that the president is willing to use this to demonstrate that you can reduce the size of the federal government, and effectively Congress is giving him the right to do so.
Yeah. Is it surprising to you, Michael, that Congress would just sort of hand over its power like that?
But this is how congressional Republicans have operated over the last 9 months. So it's no surprise because they have rubber stamped everything he's done. So that's not a surprise. I think I'm disappointed as someone who worked during the last shutdown in the House and someone who's also worked in the Senate in terms of how this has come together. It's never really been a situation where the president hasn't stepped in and shown leadership and brought leadership from both sides of the aisle together to come to a solution. That seems to be the issue here. Donald Trump waited until 48 hours before the shutdown to start conversations. That's not being an honest broker. That's not looking for solutions. And so, as we look at where we are right now, it seems like we're very far from opening the government, in large part because the president is not leading.
It does feel like we're far away right now because we're not seeing people talk to each other. They're talking about each other. Congressman, there are, in the meantime, hundreds of thousands of Americans impacted right now with fears of mass firings on top of furloughs. And here's what Republican Dusty Johnson of South Dakota had to say about that.
President Trump's been very clear that he intends to follow through with these layoffs.
I think there are going to be layoffs, but I think those layoffs will be designed not to impose harm on the American people, but there'll be layoffs that I think the administration thinks that over time will make the country stronger. There are some federal employees that shouldn't have jobs, though, Kristen. Not every single federal job is some sort of a birthright.
Congressman, is that the message Republicans should be sending right now?
Look, I have a lot of respect for Dusty Johnson, sort of side by side with him. I think he's a really bright guy. So look, I do think we need to keep in mind the federal government is not supposed to be a jobs program. I agree with Congressman Johnson that every federal employee doesn't deserve a job or, as he said, a birthright. And look, you also have to keep in mind how we got here. Republicans actually voted to keep government open. They voted on the same exact appropriations bill at the same exact levels that Democrats have voted on over and over and over again. Lastly, I think that Senator Schumer is overplaying his hand here by trying to use this healthcare subsidy issue, which I think actually creates a liability for Democrats going into the next elections, because Democrats are basically out there saying that Obamacare didn't work and it's going to require more federal subsidies.
No, the subsidies expire. The subsidies expire. They're not asking for more. They're just asking to renew them. Well, and we know if without that, then the premiums will go up double for some people. We just had a whole segment on it.
Really important distinction here. There were subsidies that were put in place during Obamacare. During COVID, Democrats came in 2021 and added a higher level or an additional subsidy. That's the one that expires. It expires solely because Democrats did it during COVID, intending it to be temporary. The law they wrote causes it to expire.
So let me just ask then, are you saying that you believe, and the Republicans believe, that those healthcare premiums should go up for millions of Americans. You would like to see that happen, and that's okay with you.
I am saying that Obamacare, the Democrats are proving and admitting that Obamacare didn't achieve the objectives of lowering healthcare costs. It's actually causing costs to go up for all Americans, which Republicans have opposed. Look, something that's bipartisan, and I'm sure Michael would agree, one of the things we've got to attack is bringing down healthcare costs overall. They've gone up way too much. They're unaffordable, and that's something that should have bipartisan support. But coming in and having the federal government spend $350 billion whenever Democrats cause this to be expired, it's an additional subsidy. I don't think it's the right hill to die on.
Michael?
50 million Americans have been given health care because of Obamacare. These subsidies in large part help working class people, rural and urban. If these go away, millions of people will lose health care just when we're starting flu season. You're seeing a new strain of COVID and rising cases across the country. That is the reality. I'll also say this. The same people complaining about the cost of these subsidies have nothing to say about Donald Trump wasting $20 billion and giving that to Argentina. If we're going to have a conversation about efficiency and effectiveness, let's have a real honest conversation, right? We can't say we have nothing to say about this $20 billion, but for some reason we have an issue with these subsidies that are going to working Americans who need help to have health care insurance, just like members of Congress who have a doctor in the basement of their building. We all don't have that. So let's have an honest conversation.
Michael Hardaway, former Congressman Garrett Graves, I appreciate having the conversation here and allowing different opinions. Welcome back. This morning, President Trump is saying he's moving forward with more cuts to federal agencies as the government shutdown moves into day 2. And helping him make those decisions, Russell Vought, the head of the Office of Management and Budget. And as the president has mentioned, he's a key author of Project 2025, the plans that got so much attention during the campaign. Vought has already announced several of the cuts since the shutdown began and has emerged as a key member of the president's team.
You all know Russell Vought. He's become very popular recently because he can trim the budget to a level that you couldn't do any other way. So they're taking a risk by having a shutdown.
But who exactly is Russell Vought, and how did he get all this power? Let's get more from New York Times Washington correspondent Coral Davenport, who just wrote a very extensive piece on the White House budget director. Coral, thanks so much for joining us. We just heard the president praising Vought for his cuts. How did he come to earn the president's trust, and what do we know about his plans and priorities?
Sure. So Russ Vought has been with the Trump administration since the first term. He was deputy budget director and then budget director in the first term. In that first White House term, he was involved. He kind of tried to use the power of the White House to cut off spending. He was involved in the decision to cut off Ukraine spending, which ended up getting the president impeached, to reroute money for building the wall, which ended up getting canceled, to try to fire employees kind of at will, thousands of federal employees. All of those were ideas that he really embraced, that he wanted the president to be able to do, that kind of fell apart. And he spent the 4 years of the Biden administration kind of relentlessly working. He started his own think tank. He worked with Project 2025 on this project of how can the president do these things and have them stick? And because he's a budget director, he thought of using the tools, the levers of the federal budget. How can the president get the power to cut off spending, to stop spending, to shut down federal agencies, to fire workers, to shrink down the government to, the size that you could fit it in a teacup? He has spent all this time really working, researching, planning, mapping, strategizing this in a deeply disciplined and focused way. And
why is he so set on shrinking the federal government? Where does that even come from?
Yeah, I mean, he's a conservative's conservative. He grew up in a very Christian home. He's deeply religious. He went to an evangelical Christian college, Wheaton College in Illinois. His first job in Washington was with Republican Senator Phil Gramm, who was sort of known as the most unloved man in Washington for his efforts to cut the budget. I think he he's talked about how he felt like for his parents, he grew up in a blue collar family. His parents were a teacher and electrician, that the burden of paying for federal government really dragged them down. He's also talked about his interpretation of the Constitution. He calls himself a radical constitutionalist who thinks the founding fathers wouldn't recognize agencies like the Federal Reserve. So I think he really is a true believer. He thinks that, the administrative state is not recognized by the Constitution, and he says it's infected by, federal workers who are woke and weaponized and sort of liberal leaning and aren't accountable to the president and to voters. So he comes at this from a place of kind of a true believer who has been working on this, realizing this, executing this for about 20 years.
Well, and he, as you mentioned, had an impact in the first Trump administration. Now he's got this humongous role in the second Trump administration, and it seems like there are really no bounds being applied to this presidency. And you have anti-tax activist Grover Norquist, you quote in your piece, saying that Vogt has, been lining up the billiards shots, getting each ball in place one by one for each consecutive move. So help us understand the vision and what it looks like moving forward, because we already went through Doge. We already went through Elon Musk and all these, tens of thousands laid off. What else does Vogt have planned? What does he want to do?
Vogt is in a lot of ways the anti-Musk. Musk kind of parachuted into Washington with so much chaos, so much haphazard action. Vogt has a really clear roadmap, a really clear plan. And his ultimate end game is to continue to do these cuts, but he is orchestrating, essentially setting up a showdown in the Supreme Court. He believes, the people around him have told me, that if he can get these cuts, these moves to give the president the power to unilaterally cut federal spending, if he can get one of these cases to go before the Supreme Court will ultimately find that the president does constitutionally have the power to cut off whatever funding he wants, or something along those lines. And if that happens, if that end game plays out in that way, then that really just reshapes the presidency and gives this president the power to really just cut down the government and legally.
Well, Coral Davenport, you have such good deep dive reporting on the New York Times. Thanks for sharing some of it with us and helping us understand the influences right now on the president as we're charting this moment, charting forward.
Right now, 42,000 federal workers at the USDA are in limbo, and so are the crucial programs they manage, which feed more than 41 million Americans a month. The government shutdown means half of the Agriculture Department staff is furloughed, while future funding is uncertain for critical federal assistance programs like SNAP, food stamps, and WIC, which provides food and support to mothers and babies. Joining me now, Ellen May, a furloughed federal worker and chapter president of the NTEU Chapter 255. Ellen, I want to let people know you are not representing your employer here. You're here speaking for yourself. Just how are you doing? How are your coworkers feeling?
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me here. My coworkers and I are feeling really conflicted in this moment. So many of us have been overworked and exhausted since April, when we lost half of the staff in our office. And so we feel even guilty for seeing this as a reprieve, because what we really want to do is to be at work helping the people who rely on SNAP and WIC to feed their families and to put food on their tables. We're feeling angry at being treated as political pawns again, so that billionaires can have more money, while the people that we serve are being, strained even further and having to worry again about their benefits being at play. And we're also just anxious because we're hearing about the RIF potentials and office closures that are looming over USDA as this shutdown kind of drags on.
So have you gotten any clarity, any reassurance about the security of your job?
No, since we logged off yesterday after about 10 a.m., we haven't heard anything. Since we're not allowed to touch our government furnished devices after a shutdown, we've just been waiting to see how this all unfolds, just like everybody else.
Do you have any sense about the food assistance programs that you work on? Any idea how long their funding might last?
Yeah, so for SNAP at least, we think that they will be okay for the month of October. October benefits have already started going out in some states. Some states send them out on the first of the month. We expect that all of the states will be able to issue SNAP benefits for the month of October, but things might get a little dicey if this drags on into November or even past that. And for programs like WIC, it's looking a lot more uncertain. It's possible that they have funding for 3 days, maybe 1 week. Of course, we hope for longer. And we have other programs too. We have programs that get food packages to seniors and people living on tribal lands. We also have programs that get farm fresh produce into schools, and we don't know about the funding for those programs right now while we're in the middle of the shutdown.
I want to play for you, if I can, what we heard from one woman. Now, she works at a food bank now, but she used to be a recipient of food assistance herself. Take a listen.
When I was on it, I look forward for it every month. I mean, you're going to see kids like out here, they're going to be hungry, they're going to be starving, they're going to be trying to steal out of grocery stores. It's going to be really hard. I mean, it's going to be a big struggle.
Tell us what you know. What do you think will happen to the people who your program supports if funding runs out?
Yeah, we think that they'll have to turn to the food banks and to their friends and family to try to help them get more support. Food banks are already really strained right now, and we support them too in the course of our job. So we are concerned that the food banks will have enough food to feed all the people that might be turning to them for assistance. We have concerns that sometimes if the food banks are getting food trucks with food that's been transported in unsafe conditions, that they won't know what to do with all of that food. They won't know whether to accept it to feed the hungry people, or we don't know if they'll have to reject it and people will have to go hungry because the government is unable to care for all Americans right now, not just the richest ones.
Ellen May, I can't imagine being in your shoes or your colleagues, and the work you do is something that we should be proud of. And I'm sorry you're going through this. Keep in touch. Will you let us know how it's going?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Chris, for having us on here. And I'll definitely keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Ellen, thank you.
Joining us now, MSNBC congressional reporter Michael Schnell, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, and Semaphore White House correspondent Shelby Talcott. Michael, any movement today?
Yeah, Katie, not really. Look, I will caveat that with the fact that both the House and Senate are out of session today in observance of Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday, but still not a lot of action up here. We did hear from Speaker Mike Johnson and his leadership team a little bit earlier this morning, and they had stuck by the same talking points, arguing that the onus of this shutdown is on Democrats, and then the best way to reopen the government is to pass that House-passed continuing resolution that was crafted by Republicans. Listen to a taste of what Speaker Johnson had to say.
People say, why aren't you negotiating with Schumer and Jeffries? Because I quite literally have nothing to negotiate. There's nothing I can pull out of the bill that was a Republican priority to say, oh, we won't do that. Why don't you guys vote for it now? I don't have anything. I didn't put anything in it to send it over. I'm stunned. I'm stunned that they have decided to shut the government down and hurt people. It is on them 100%.
Now, Katie, we know that just agreeing to that Republican-crafted stopgap bill is a non-starter among the majority of Senate Democrats. Now, we are aware that some conversations are underway in a bipartisan fashion in the Senate about potentially finding an off-ramp to the current situation. We saw some of those huddles happening on the Senate floor yesterday. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said it was his understanding that they would continue today. But what that bipartisan off-ramp could be, that agreement to reopen the government, really remains elusive as of now. Now, what does the schedule for the next few days look like? The Senate is going to be back here in the Capitol tomorrow. They'll be holding a pair of votes. First, on that Democratic crafted stopgap that includes the Obamacare subsidies and other health care provisions. We're expecting that to fall short of the 60 vote threshold needed to move forward. Senate will also vote on that Republican crafted stopgap again. Similarly, we expect that to fail as well. Then the path forward remains unlikely, though John Thune, saying this morning that he doesn't expect the Senate will remain in recess over the weekend, which, Katie, that means the shutdown could likely extend into next week.
Yeah, sounds like it. All right, so who is to blame for the shutdown, according to American voters? Here is a Washington Post text poll. 47% say Trump and the Republicans in Congress. 30% say Democrats in Congress. 23% not sure. This is 1,010 adults reached by text on October 1st. And then the other part of this, which is what this whole shutdown is about, these federal subsidies for health care. Here's what people say about that. 71% of the country wants to extend health care subsidies. 29% wants it ended as scheduled. It would end in January, and in some cases, premiums would triple to unaffordable highs for many, 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 many Americans. Vaughn, where's the White House's head on that? Do these numbers stir them?
Apparently not, because we have not heard any indication that they have any intention of relenting. And I think if the president was worried about it, I don't think that he would have been so explicit as to welcome shutdowns. He's done it in the past. And then I think it's worth going back to just earlier this week. He has been very vocal, arguing that this is effectively, in some ways, an effective approach to cut down government. Take a listen.
We can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like. And you all know Russell Vought. He's become very popular recently because he can trim the budget to a level that you couldn't do any other way.
And so, well, you could say Capitol Hill, right, for a little analogy. They're figuring out how the restaurant should be run moving forward. And then meanwhile, Russ Vought and Donald Trump are in the kitchen with the active ingredients in deciding what to slice and dice here. And those two men are here meeting this afternoon to go through potential firings across agencies and potential cuts of projects. He's threatened 16 Democratic states, their green energy projects. He's threatened the tunnel that is being constructed here in New York, a subway transformation project. So there's a lot on the line. And frankly, until the government is reopened, the Office of Personnel Management, they sent out to agencies stating very specifically that the OMB director is the one who is empowered to determine which federal workers are accepted and able to work. And right now, they are making the case, the OMB director, that those who would be processing the firings are crucial workers and workers that should continue to work.
And Russ Vought has been dreaming about this since puberty, according to Utah Senator. Strange way to put it, but I guess that underscores how much he wants to slash the government. What's interesting, Shelby, is Donald Trump, listen, it's a risk, obviously, to shut down the government over anything. And the Democrats are running that risk. They're hoping that banging on about health care subsidies right now as the exchanges open up for enrollment and as people are getting their notices for what next year's premiums are going to cost is going to make a difference. People are going to understand why they've shut down the government. At the same time, what I find puzzling is that when Donald Trump says, you know, if you do this, I'm going to have to permanently lay off people and it's going to be your fault. It's like he's saying, I'm going to punch a guy in the face. And if you don't stop me, if you don't stop my fist, then it's your fault I punched him. It seems like a gamble as well from the White House.
I think anytime there's a shutdown, there's a gamble. Both sides are taking a gamble. You never know ultimately who the American people are going to blame. But the White House is betting at the end of the day that Democrats are going to take the blame. And when I talk to White House officials, they remain confident in that. And they're not really hiding the ball with the fact that part of the result of this shutdown is that they want to, as a senior White House official described to me, force Democrats to understand the consequences of keeping the government closed. And so part of that, you're seeing these sort of cuts, you're seeing these initiatives that are targeting Democratic states. And they're not hiding the ball that these are programs that don't fit the administration's needs, as an administration official told me. And so they're using this shutdown as sort of an opportunity to continue some of those early on Doge-like cuts, to continue shrinking the U.S. government.
Give me a little bit about more from your conversation with Senator Kramer about Rust vote.
Right, yeah. Republicans are concerned about this. They're concerned that they're going to move too quickly and sort of lose the advantage that Republicans believe they had. So Senator Kramer told my colleagues that Russ is less politically in tune than the president, and that we as Republicans have never had so much moral high ground on a government funding bill in our lives. I don't see why we would squander it, which I think is the risk of being aggressive with executive power in this moment. And so you're hearing from Republicans who are sort of urging caution from Russ vote on all of this. They want the government to take a little bit of a step back and maybe be less aggressive in their cuts, because they're concerned that they're going to lose this, what they believe is a winning argument for the American people.
I mean, it's basically the risk that I was just talking about. Why is the White House getting in the way of just saying this is all the Democrats' fault? Why would the White House want to take it a step further and start permanently cutting jobs and then try to blame it on the other side when they're the ones that are in charge of those cuts? So, Michael, are you hearing similar sentiment on the Hill, or is Senator Kramer an outlier?
I think that by and large, we're seeing most Republicans back up President Trump and Russ Vought on this matter. Russ Vought actually spoke directly to House Republicans yesterday. I spoke to a number of members who were on that call, and they told me after that they are supportive of these reductions in force. A number of members had actually said that on the call themselves, according to people who were listening. We also heard from Speaker Mike Johnson this morning, who during that press conference was actually asked directly, are you concerned? You argue that Republicans have the upper hand in this shutdown and that Democrats will be to blame for the situation. Are you at all concerned that these firings and these mass layoffs will prompt that public opinion to change and for Republicans to actually take on more of the onus of the shutdown by the public? And Speaker Johnson said he's not concerned about that. He's not worried. He also actually said that constitutionally what the president and Russ Vought are doing is legal, saying that because the legislative branch is essentially shut down with Congress, with government not funded, the executive branch has those powers, and Russ Vought, as the director of the Office of Management and Budget, he says has wide discretion over what can be done during a shutdown. So the majority of Republicans we are seeing stand quite behind President Trump in this situation and argue that he's in the right for what he's doing. But I'm curious to see how those polls are going to shake out, because, again, these firings are going to impact what they're saying could be thousands of people.
This is obviously a gamble, who's going to get blamed for it, because the midterms are coming up. I mean, they're not coming up, but we are about a year away, and people are going to start campaigning on it. The last time Donald Trump was in office during the midterms, the Democrats focused almost exclusively on health care, and they won back a majority in the midterm elections. And Donald Trump, was investigated quite a bit. The focus on health care seems to be what they're trying to do now, and they're hoping for the same success.
Right. And actually, for the Republican angle of this, I think, right, you see the polling numbers. It doesn't make sense why they would so openly celebrate mass firings. At the same time, people like Russ Vought, I don't know if he's been doing it since puberty, had this vision, but at the same time, they've seen Donald Trump as a vessel. This is what their vision of an American government wants.
To make the government
and
smaller.
This, 2025 and 2026, is their moment. Right? Forget what happens next November. This is their window of opportunity, the next year, next 13 months, to go and reshape the American government. I was told back during the transition, Russ Vought, it wasn't clear whether he was going to be onboarded, but Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk were big proponents because they saw him as the portal to being able to actually execute the budgetary means to go and do what they knew that they would not be able to do independently through Doge. They're no longer around. Russ Vought is, and he is the man who is carrying out this vision of the Heritage Foundation, the Center for Renewing America, all of these different right-wing groups. This is their moment.
They campaigned on it. There's no doubt about that.
Correct.
Von Hilliard, always good to have you. Michael Schnell, good to have you as well. And you, Shelby Talcott.